Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome back, everybody. Our next guest, she is an award-winning actor, author, filmmaker. She has books coming out in April of 2023. Wow, that's only a couple weeks from where we're speaking right now. She has a degree in speech communications, theater, and acting. She also has degrees in nursing and in healthcare management. You know, what happens when you combine all these things together and you have a person that has a huge heart and wants to help charities and people learn to communicate better? You have Dr. Candace Campbell, otherwise known as Florence Nightingale, because she performs a sort of an improv show on stage, one, to benefit the people who are sitting in the audience listening to her perform, and two, to benefit charities that she likes to get involved with. And that's the whole thing is the art of blending art and science into a positive system of change is her mantra. So why don't we welcome to the show Candace Campbell, and let's hear how she got this started, where the story begins. Welcome to the show, Candy. Why don't you tell us, you do the Florence Nightingale thing, you help with corporate communications and all these wonderful things. How did all this get started, and why did you start it?
You know, sometimes you're not necessarily looking for something to happen, and it sort of bugs you until it gets resolved in your life, whether it's a question or an irritation, you know, something that keeps you up at night. And it sort of was a combination of all of those things, I think. You know, I call it the crazy quilt of my life. When I was going through some certain things, I didn't quite understand how I could take a degree in acting and pair that up in any way with being a nurse, until, of course, I became a nurse. And then I recognized right away, you really don't know what's going to happen when you go into a patient room. And then as I started being a mentor and then an academic, when I had students, I would tell them, you know, nursing and acting are a lot alike. They run in parallel tracks in a lot of ways. First of all, when you walk into a patient room, you already know on the back end, you've had a report from somebody or read a doctor's orders or whatever. You have an idea of why that person is there, and you have an idea of what you're supposed to do, and you have an idea of probably what the conversations will entail. But it's all improv, right? Life is improv.
Yeah.
And so when you walk through that door, it's just like the proscenium arch of going on stage in a way. And just as actors learn that when you're on stage, you know, if you watch kid actors, child actors who don't know anything. If you go to one of those school plays, it's really cute because you're aware that they're all in their head about the lines, and they're usually nervous, and it's very adorable. But what happens typically is that they are focused on what they need to do. And if they're told, I need to go in and I need to say these lines to this particular person, they lose focus on anything else that might be happening in the room. It makes some great comedy sometimes because they don't have any idea of what's going on. And as a nurse, we walk in, or doctor or any clinician, especially if you're the patient, you have somebody walk into you, they're a total stranger. And especially if you're sitting there in some little flimsy gown with a bow in the back, losing all sense of independence there. You're particularly at some stranger's mercy, and they're asking you very personal questions. It can be unnerving. And just like a beginning actor who doesn't know any, what is to be expected, when we are confident that it's going to be all right, that we have certain training and we have certain skills, we know certain things are supposed to happen, and if not good things happen, there's a team to back us up, then we go in and we feel free to scan the room, to speak with other people who are in the room, family, friends, partners, whatever they are, and it becomes a safe atmosphere for everybody in the room. And I think it's really important once you realize that life imitates art and art imitates life, right?
Yeah. Well, from an artist's perspective, it's like that's kind of the point. As an artist, I'm a cinema documentary maker, and I'm a photographer. And it's like, and my canvas is like capturing life, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
so yeah.
And I did not intend on ever becoming an author, becoming a filmmaker. I did intend in college to become an actor. But when I found out through a series of events that it looked like the prescribed way of getting ahead was taking off your clothes, decided that wasn't going to be for me. So I quit acting for a long time, traveled around the world, and got called to be a nurse. And then I really saw how I could take my artistic bent and sort of blend them together, which is now one of my taglines, blending art and science for
Yes.
positive system change.
I
And
think we said
so
that
it
somewhere in
goes.
your intro.
You did.
Yeah. So yeah, and that is an important statement. Blending art and science, because the two actually really go well together if we open our minds to the possibilities, right?
Exactly. Every good scientist knows if you've done any time in a lab, and as a nurse, we have to take microbiology and a lot of other scientific courses. One of the things that I loved about a particular physical science and microbiology professor that I had was he was encouraging us to be curious. And if
Mm-hmm.
you continue to have the what if question in your head, then you're on the road to discovery and possibly innovations if you just keep an open mind. And I think that has a lot to do with the history of the arts, not just one, but all of them. When you think of Galileo, he was a scientist, but he certainly was also an engineer and an artist. And a lot of that, just his brain was
Right.
percolating on ideas all of the time. And when he saw a problem, he sought to find out more about it and possibly a solution. And you look at Alexander Graham Bell, at
Yeah.
Einstein, They were all
Oh,
artistic in their way too.
see, you just brought up one of my, we'll put in quotation marks, mentors, because I was born way too late to ever met Albert Einstein. Uh, um, but it's his that thought experiment process, right? Is like
Yeah.
to open his mind up to what is actually happening. We would have never found the relationship between energy and mass if he hadn't gone through these open-ended thought experiment processes, you know. So
And you know what I find interesting about that, Michael, is that I know in my own life, when I started to plow a new road, so to speak, in something, and that's what I did with the film Micro Premature Babies, How Low Can You Go? There were people who, because they didn't see me as a filmmaker, they had known me as a nurse, let's say, they, really tried to dissuade me from asking the questions, from doing the work, and taking that when it happened. That I started the project anyway, started going back to film school and doing some of those things. There were people around me who just didn't support the work. There were those, thankfully, that did, but several people who were in leadership positions at the time were just throwing out roadblocks of, oh, well, you can't do this because this and that and the other thing. So, interestingly enough, the hospital where I was working and hoping to do some filming, I was not allowed to do. But I went to some of the larger hospitals in the area and they saw the vision. They rolled out the red carpet. They did
right,
everything they could to help because they saw the purpose of this particular film was to erase some untoward assumptions about what we could do towards the now we can say the turn of the century in terms of keeping micro premature babies who were just really small as your hand,
yes,
not only alive but to good effect later.
yeah. Um, all right. When the I remember this that when a micro preemie is ready to graduate and go home, they're about the size of a beanie baby.
Yes.
It's like, and because 5 pounds isn't really that large of a baby yet. You
No,
know,
you're right. And some of
we
these
get
babies
to,
are
yeah,
about a pound when they're born.
yeah. You in a pre-interview you said something. The lowest you found was like 700 grams, was it, or
Oh,
less,
no, no.
or less than that?
340 grams. There was a set of twins. Again, they were 23. Well, it's hard to say exactly the gestational age because sometimes we didn't have real proof of, when the
Yeah,
insemination was. But yeah, because they were natural, they weren't assisted births.
yeah,
And so all I know is that the smaller the baby, the more difficulties and the likelihood of more problems later on. Um, there are now recorded cases of babies who were supposedly 21 and 22 weeks who are less than 340 grams, which is the smallest that I particularly saw. But I haven't been, in the NICU for now 10 years, more than 10 years. So,
yeah,
I don't know. But I was also working occasionally in the follow-up clinic and got to see that here's the thing, Michael, depending upon the support of the parents, the 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 way where the baby goes home, the way the child, if it was a bird, you'd say depending upon how the mother feathers the nest. It's very much like that with human behavior. And you
yeah,
can understand if babies are coming from a substance abused mom and they're suffering because of that, or they have some other disease that was passed on through the placenta by the mom's bad choices, unfortunate choices, then those children suffer more. But the film that I
Right.
did was about the other sorts of babies who had moms who did everything right, and they still had
Yeah.
a very short pregnancy.
Well, that brings me to the topic of HELP syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my my babies were he was born because mom had HELP syndrome,
Yeah.
and and they put her on a special diet. The gynecologist put her on a special diet. They say, "Oh, we're going to get you through this. We're going to get don't we're we're gonna make sure that you have a normal pregnancy with all this diet control, vitamins, all that sort of stuff." And you know what? It still went south.
Well, I
And
would say that
but
to guarantee anything like that is
well, it
not.
brings me to a question, because you have that look now, like when you walk into the room, because I mean these parents are distraught
Oh,
because
yeah.
they especially the ones they did everything right,
Yeah.
right? They followed
Yeah.
the instructions. They There was no substance abuse or any of that sort of stuff. So now they're distraught. Thinking, what did I do wrong, and what's going to happen now? You're the nurse, and you're walking in to care for their baby in front of the parents. How do you communicate as confidently that we're going to do our best, and things are going we're going to try to bring about the best outcome possible?
I think it's really a team effort. And depending upon where you are, I've had the pleasure of working at a few NICUs, and then when I was a professor, guided students in clinical through many other NICUs. And there's something about working in the NICU. It is, as you can imagine, there's sometimes tragedies that happen, like in any hospital. But overall, it is almost like a sacred place. I mean, people who work there are so dedicated to making it the best, safest place for both parents and children that I think we all were invested in that philosophy. And we all understood, and parents, once the event had happened, that the birth happens, and very often it's a shock, and so
Mm-hmm.
little teeny babies are having to get whisked away really quickly to the NICU. Once that happens, of course, the doctor's the first one that has to go and give the game plan and tell the aerial view of this is sort of going to be what we expect to be the course of what's going to happen. And then on a daily basis, because we all round and chat about each case, each person, then we give them the updates and try and reassure them that, don't try and think too much ahead right now. Let's stay in the moment. Let's talk about today. Let's talk
Mm-hmm.
about these next 8 hours or 12 hours. Because sometimes when the babies, as you recall, are very unstable, that's the most we want to even talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, I do remember a couple of, because when a baby's sitting in the hospital for um, elongated periods of time, there's a lot of events that happen, and I do remember one event, because they were very kind, because um, we had a daughter also, and they allowed the 5-year old to come in with us. It's
Yeah.
like, no, we need everybody to be on board as a unit. They wanted the whole family, as much as family as possible, to be on board with it. And there was one time that an event happened, and alarms went off, and they scooted us into the hallway and said, so we're sitting there sitting on the floor in the hallway because there was no chairs or anything. All the chairs were in the pods, um, and and one of the nurses came out and she just had this essence of confidence, like, don't worry, we have this handled, we're going to take care of this. It's like, so with your improv program that you also do you teach people to put that forward with, so that they so that the patient feels okay, they're doing it, it's like the worry's a little less of an edge.
I would say that's more of a byproduct of the work. And let me explain. When I facilitate groups in hospitals,
Mm-hmm.
we usually start with the leaders, the leaders teams, and in a best case scenario, we'll do train the trainer, so that they can then do applied improvisation with the other people that are, so that everybody is sort of on the same page and understand. But to define it more, to give you a glimpse, um, it's really about relationship building. And as a team member in a hospital, and since we're using the NICU, I'll keep on that illustration. As a team member, it really helps if you know each other pretty well. Chances are it won't take long because you're all working pretty closely in close
Mm-hmm.
quarters. And in the best scenario, like where I was for 23 years, it was, or almost 23 years at that one hospital, it was my home away from home. We knew what was happening in our families. We celebrated with each other. I still, some of the best friends I ever had, I worked with because we were together in the trenches, not unlike the military in a way, fighting the war of disease or prematurity, as it were.
Yeah.
And we could trust each other. And let me give you an example. I remember it first dawned on me that this was true when, we have a lot of interprofessional clinicians that work in the NICU, whether it's physical therapy, occupational therapy, respiratory therapy, they are key. And there were smaller a number of respiratory therapists who were assigned to the NICU. And we had a pretty big NICU, I guess, at the time, medium size. We could have about 23 babies at one time.
Yeah.
And so at the time before they had the pods, the baby pods, we used to call it a baby barn, when it was just a really big room or two big rooms, and the babies in the isolates were only about 3 feet apart. And so it was kind of nice for parents because they got to, chat more, etc. But anyway, I do remember this one time when I was maybe only a couple of years at this one hospital, and an alarm went off, and two of us looked across, and because everybody's always, an alarm goes off, the nurses look, everybody looks to see if there's a signal for you to come and help. And I know that this RT at the time, and he's since retired also, he had his hands busy in the isolette with the baby, and he just looked over at me, and I zoomed right over, and he said later, "Oh, I'm so glad you were there, because I knew it was, I was so glad it was you on today, because I knew all I had to do was give you a certain look and you'd be right there to help."
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's like. And that gives you the confidence with the team.
Okay. Well, that does remind me of theater, or um, because you've practiced it enough that you know when that person, you know the cue, and you know that person is going to appear on the cue, right?
Yep.
So yeah.
Except in improv, when you don't know. But I'll tell you what, the thing that people don't know, Michael, is that when we practice improv, we can't, you never do the same scene twice. But
Mm-hmm.
there are principles. There are principles.
Mm-hmm.
And not unlike any profession that has, skills that are discrete skills that are practiced. Improvers practice discrete principles. For instance, say yes and. Now, it doesn't mean we don't ever negate anything in a scene on stage, but if you get used to saying yes, taking a moment, accepting whatever it is that's happening in front of you right then, instead of panicking and saying yes, and then building on that with the and continuing the thought, a couple of things happen. First of all, you are in a much deeper relationship with that other person, because in improv, they don't know what you're going to say either. And they have to really listen. So we say in improv, we say words are golden, because I don't know what you're going to say next, Michael. So I'm really listening. I'm not thinking in the back of my head what I'm going to answer. I'm not, I don't have a memorized line like you would in a scripted play.
Right.
I'm wondering how I can make you look good, which is another principle. Even if we're playing conflicting roles that, you're the hero and I'm the villain or something like that, we will do whatever.
Good as the villain.
You what?
You still have to look good as the villain.
Yeah. Well, what I mean is you don't negate, if you said, for instance, that we're going to do something or rather, whatever, let's go have a picnic or whatever, and I said, no, it's going to rain, that would be blocking it. But if I accept that idea and then we go on and create a fantasy scene, it's not unlike when we do applied improv, not for performance, but for training people how to really deeply listen, how to really connect with another person. It's kind of, we say, once you hear a bell ring, you can't unring that bell. When you're
Right.
in relationship with those people, there's no labels, there's no hierarchy. You're just in this fantasy world doing the best you can. And that's really a lot like work, the real world.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and that makes a lot of sense because yeah, I love doing improv. It's a lot of fun. But when you take it and you can use it as a team building thing, right?
Yeah.
Because you are teaching people to like, okay, what are they going to do next, and how do I support what it is that they're about to do?
Well, if I might, let me just tell you two things that I learned the very first time that I was asked to facilitate applied improvisation with a group of Silicon Valley engineers. Now, and I might have told you this before, but when I got there, because scrolling back, I co-founded an improv company in the San Francisco area. And all of us were met doing stand-up comedy, and then we morphed into doing some stand-up and some improv in our little shows. And we were together about 3.5 years. And one night when this fellow came and invited us to please come to his startup company, he said, I'm working with a lot of really smart people, but they just don't like each other very much. There's a lot of ego in the way. And so, as it turned out, I was the only one who had curriculum development. So I was the one who said, sure, I'll take it on, and created a workshop for the day. And when I got there, I believe there was 8 fellows in the room. I was the only lady. And most of them were like this when I walked in. They had to be there. They were mandated to be there. And then their boss, who had hired me, was there. And he said, tough crowd, tough room, but you're going to do great. I'll see you later. And I went, whoa, whoa, whoa. Wait a minute. Where are you going? He goes, oh, do your thing. I said, no, that's not how this works. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, we're going to bust down the silos in your workplace, and they need to see you making relationships with, creating relationships with them. It'll be fun. Trust me. So then he was like sweating because I think he was afraid of losing the position, the esteem, the respect. But you know what happened afterwards was exactly the opposite. Oh my gosh. Those, and I was invited back more than once. Those testimonials, the reviews of that day were so amazing because they all admitted, especially the ones who were the most, who resisted the most, were, as it so often happens, the ones who were so crazy about it and wanted everybody to be trained in this way. And the thing that the person who hired me had hoped for started to happen. This culture change, the solutions, we had now professional relationships that were not in contention. So it's a powerful tool.
Yeah. But I can see it being a very powerful tool, and in that particular instance with all these programmers, I'm assuming they were programmers.
Yeah, they were.
um, that they're like, oh no, my idea is better, or instead of that sort of a situation, you have a situation, how do we build the best idea together?
Yeah.
you know and that's a much more I mean, yeah, much more funner.
Well, that was another thing. The byproduct is that they were laughing so hard because, oh, I forgot to tell you the lessons that I learned. The number one lesson was that it was a lot easier. Stand up is hard. We work so hard trying to get just the right things to do, the chunks to make people laugh every few seconds. That is hard work. It takes a lot of time. But I, as a facilitator, I didn't have to do anything. I mean, I knew how to encourage and do the debriefings, and those are key to make sure that people feel safe, etc. In the learning.
Yeah.
But they were making themselves laugh. I didn't have to do that at all. And then the second realization, Michael, was that aside from not having to put in so much time trying to learn a stand-up bit, I was so validated by that day myself. It felt so good. Maybe this is the nurse in me wanting to make a positive difference in the world. It felt so good to know that I had just given this gift of, it's like a new outfit for these people. They could use it, and they were using it, and they had a changed mindset. I think that does the world a lot of good.
There it is. That and there's a huge reason to do anything like that, is to change that mindset and to give and spread the love, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So okay, I'm trying to speed along here because because you actually do a stage show, and I want to get that in there before
Okay.
we finish, right? That because I think your stage show is the whole point to the whole thing, spreading the love, right?
Definitely one of the points. Yeah.
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 So
Um,
go ahead, tell us about your stage show, is like, because I'm excited to hear more about this.
well, it's my third solo show. And I will tell you really quickly that the first solo show was done when that wonderful group of 4 people basically broke up because, a couple of them moved away. And then, stuff happens. And we had pitched and then was paid partly for a gig that we got because it was one of my professional nursing associations. And I needed the money, and I didn't want to be embarrassed and say, oh, we can't do it. So I really, truth be known, went to prayer and said, oh my God, what am I going to do? I have no clue. And within 3 weeks, I had my first solo show. That was, just we call it a trunk show. I did different characters and, would put on a hat or a silly, whatever and do that character. It was a comedy show. And then the second one was one that was in the Fringe Festival, got the top 10 in the Fringe Festival in San Francisco. I think it was 97 or 98. I can't even remember anymore. And then I got invited. The show then got picked up by another theater and got me into ASCAP for the music that I wrote for that one. And that was where I learned how to do characters that had a conversation with each other. And on that vein, I was done with that. I wasn't going to do any more solo shows because it's a lot of work. And, it was good and everything, but I didn't make a lot of money. It was fun, but, unless you have a reason to do something, and I had plenty of other things to do. I had 3 kids. So then in 2010, while I now was faculty at the University of San Francisco, our wonderful librarian came into a meeting and said, did you all know that in honor of Florence Nightingale's 100th anniversary of her death, it's been 100 years since she died. Oh.
Wow.
She said, and we're like, a big whoop, we're supposed to celebrate this, She said, well, the thing is, the British Library and some other people over there who know about her have taken her 200 books and articles and over 10,000 of her letters that we have extant, and they've digitized them. So come on down. I've got them for free. I'll give you the code. You can look through. Well, as it turned out, I was working in the city, but I was living in the suburbs, and traffic is terrible. So when I was on campus 3 days a week for 3 years, instead of getting in the traffic, I would fire up the computer and start reading. And the librarian joked that, to her knowledge, I was the only one who did that. But I got hooked, really hooked on Florence Nightingale. And so then I was talking about her, and I'd already gotten my doctorate working, with people at Stanford in this using applied improv. And somebody heard me talking, and they said, wait a minute, I thought you were all excited about the improv, and now you're talking about this Florence Nightingale chick. I'm like, yes, that's true. And this friend, he said, well, wait a minute, you're a nurse and you're an actor and you already had 2 solo shows. Why isn't this your 3rd solo show? And I said, no, I don't want to do another show. It's too hard. And he said, oh, really? Well, what would make you want to even do the show? I said, listen, God himself would have to tell me that it was, my lot to do this show. So at 9:30 the next morning, this crazy friend of mine, Barry Wishner, he calls and he goes, this is God. Do the show. So I started in, and we actually created it in 2014. And I did it a couple of times a year for a long time. And I was a full-time faculty. I was busy. And then I got a manager and had 12 contracts just before COVID in 3 countries.
Wow.
And then COVID came. And so last year we started firing up the air miles again and started doing the show more often. And then I was honored to be invited to this off-Broadway festival. It's called the United Solo Theater Festival in New York. And I'm leaving this Sunday, and we're opening the festival night on Tuesday, March 7th. And then we'll have, I'm not sure how many performances we'll have. We've been promised 4 or 8, depending upon how the seats sell. So if anybody's in New York and they want to come out and meet Miss Nightingale, I say she's a spunky old broad.
Mm. Very fun. Very fun. So that would be this weekend because this podcast is airing for the first time. It's going up on our database March 3rd. So that's going to
Ooh,
be after we've released this podcast. That it'll be in 4 days, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So we'll have to plaster this all over social media.
I appreciate it.
So
I appreciate it.
yeah. With that being said, we're starting to run out of time.
Yeah.
And Candy, you're a wonderful person.
Aw.
I want to do more work with you. So how do I do that? What's the best ways to get a hold of you and work with you?
Okay. So, Michael, anybody can email me at Candy Campbell, that's CAMPBELL.com. And if they want to know more about the Florence Nightingale, they can go to that website, see videos and testimonials. It's Florence Nightingale Live, LIVE.com. And if they are interested in tickets, they can go to unitedsolo.org. I'll say it again. If they want tickets, they could go to unitedsolo.org or theaterrow.org. And that is in New York on 42nd Street, just a few blocks off Broadway.
Yay!
So,
Awesome.
yeah, we're excited.
Cool. Thank you again so much, and thank you everybody for listening today. Please find that subscribe button wherever it may be on your screen. And if you're in New York or you're going to be in New York the weekend of March 7th, 2023, go and check out Candy and Florence Nightingale performance.
Thank you so much, Michael. A pleasure to get to know you, and we'll see you in Vancouver.
So I wish upon that shooting star, and then
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.